Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Boost Pickup. I'm your host, Vaudable, and joining me for as long as we can have him around is my lovely co-host, the new one on the show, Hunted. How are you feeling about the new season getting started up?
Man, it has been so hectic recently. I'm sure that you feel the pain as much as I do, but it has been crazy busy just for us. But it's awesome because that means that Rocket League's ramping up again, and we've got more stuff to watch, and can't complain about that.
Oh, yeah, always great to have more stuff to watch, more events to participate in, and much more Rocket League. Speaking of how much more that we have of Rocket League and everything else, we're going to have more Boost Pickup. We're going to have it every single Thursday. Again, for those who might just be tuning in the first time, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, and whatever the other time zones that you might be listening to in around there. Probably better to use a converter. But we do want to talk about a new format that we have for the show. Before, during the off season, we used to go over tournaments, different results, kind of roster changes. Now, since the season has started, season 8 of the RLCS, we also got Rival Series and CRL, Grand Series, LPL, all these crazy events going on. We have just 4 different really big sections that we focus on. So RLCS is the first one, North America, Europe, South America, OCE. Rival Series, North America and Europe. CRL, East and Western conferences. They used to have 4, now they only have 2. And then we kind of have like an overtime section if we have any more time left in the hour-long runtime of the show for any questions and answers. So if there's anyone tuning into the chat who has some things they want to say about any of the predictions we've made. And that's another thing. Why don't you tell them, Hunted, about the predictions and how we're kind of working those into the show?
Yeah, well, since I joined the show and brought actual Rocket League knowledge to no, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, we decided that it's always a fun thing to do, and we really wanted to analyze the all of the Rocket League, not just North America, not just Europe RLCS, but the Rival Series, the collegiate stuff, even a little bit of a deep dive into some of the Grand Series stuff like that. So. It's with the predictions. I think it's just kind of a fun way to spark that conversation. And, we do get to have a little bit of a competition to see who truly does have more of that Rocket League knowledge. But either way, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty great. If you've seen similar things like that, like E-League usually do it for any of their CSGO events or other events like that, whenever they have different teams competing. And at the end, they just crown the victor of that. It's pretty nice to see. But we also have Twitter votes that we have integrated into it. Follow me at Vaudable on Twitter to get involved in those polls. Every single week, we'll have some. We're not including South America and OCE just because of kind of a lack of knowledge of the scene, as well as there's just so many different events going on that we just want to limit it to North America and EU as well as CRL, because we're actually both participating as casters for the B stream, and that's the focus that we'll have for CRL, because there's 3 days before Thursday and Friday that there's CRL stuff going on, and we can't possibly track all of that, especially to get our predictions in before the show starts.
Yeah, and just the way that CRL works in general, especially this season with how many games every team has to play in the span of 3 weeks, it would be quite impossible to keep track of that. But either way, I think there's plenty to talk about, especially in the college scene.
Yeah, but let's get started with our first section. It is going to be RLCS. We'll start with good old North America. Recently, the Peeps just got picked up by the Pittsburgh Knights, and this is kind of the overview of the matches that will be happening this weekend, the first week of league play. Any of those matches specifically stick out to you, Hunted?
Looking at this. Of course, it's going to be how do the Peeps come in to the RLCS, right? I mean, They just come off of the victory at Montreal. People are expecting good things of them. It can be shaky going into it, and I think our predictions kind of show that there are some people who have a lot of faith in the Peeps, others who temper their expectations.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up our predictions that we already have for North America. Kind of go over what we agreed on for these matchups. To go over those matches, there's the Pittsburgh Knights versus Ghost, Birds and the Bees versus G2, Pittsburgh Knights versus Rogue, Ghost versus C9, and NRG versus Space Station. But let's look at our predictions in just a moment to compare them with what we thought and what Twitter thought as well for North America for RLCS. There we go. And the biggest thing, and you can see it right there, that there might be a Peeps fan in the house, and that is probably me, as I'm the only one who really voted for the Pittsburgh, or the Peepsburg Knights, as they have themselves named on Twitter, against Rogue. So why don't you tell me first why you think Rogue's going to win this one? I think it's pretty obvious, but, you know.
Well, when it comes to Rogue... Well, first, let's start with the elephant in the room in the Pittsburgh Knights, okay? Just real quickly. Yeah. They're coming in, their first day in RLCS, they have to play 2 matches. First against Ghost, then follow up against Rogue. I know we're not talking about Ghost, but I think the Peeps have the advantage over Rogue. I'm going to say, or over Ghost, I'm going to say the Peeps, like every time. The Knights have the advantage over Ghost. At least in my opinion, because, you know, memory and illusion, I'm still not 100% sold on the team. I think they have a lot of potential, but they need to show it this season. But when it comes to Rogue, they have looked so much better. They've really shown that they have the talent that AJ brings. Like, that potential is finally turning into results for Rogue. And it's crazy because Kronovi's no longer the best player on that team. And
true.
You know, people talk about the big 3, Cloud9, G2, NRG. You think who's going to slot in at 4th? You have to give Rogue a shot because of how good they've looked recently. And I think the Pittsburgh Knights, they're going to fall victim to that in week 1.
Yeah, my decision on going with the Pittsburgh Knights is mainly due to, well, I think they just have more explosiveness based on their previous results. So when we've seen Rogue, they got to a certain point where they're just kind of hard stuck in that 4th position, 4th, 5th for a lot of the tournaments that they've been in recently. They have solid results in like the first half, and then afterwards they don't really do too well. With league play, they did a lot better in the latter half of the season last go around. But this time I feel like just because it's the start of the season and because they didn't do as well as they would have liked, they dropped 3-1 to Lotus in DreamHack Montreal. I feel like the Pittsburgh Knights, if they win the one against Ghost, they're kind of a momentum-based team where they will take that in stride and use that to their victory. But obviously we'll have to see what happens at the day of the event.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you when you say that they're a momentum-based team. I mean, you can't kind of counteract that point when we watch them in Montreal do that. And I think they were also kind of an unknown to a lot of the top teams, especially the international teams.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe there's more of a, hey, we should probably look out for the Knights this season, or, you know, more of a focus. But when you pick up a player in Mist from the Birds and the Bees that came over before Montreal, you know, he brings that kind of aspect that never counts the Knights out of a series, even against some of the best teams in the world, even against NRG, Cloud9, G2. You got to give the Knights at least a bit of confidence going in. But again, Rogue is one of those teams that you say, yeah, that's an easy win, and then all of a sudden Rogue comes out of nowhere and wins that series. So I don't know. Personally, I think the Knights go 1-1 to start the season.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening. I feel like regardless of who wins that series between the Pittsburgh Knights and Rogue, it's going to be close. Like looking at the Twitter poll that I did a bit earlier, we got 27 votes, and it's solid. This is the first time we've really done this. And it was 48% Peeps, 52% Rogue, so it was pretty divided on that one. All the other ones that we saw, G2, C9, NRG, all those wins, like 90 or 80 something percent of people voted for those. So it's pretty easy to see which matchup's going to be the most entertaining, most likely the first week of league play for North America.
And I think now with the Peeps getting picked up by the Pittsburgh Knights, only Birds and Bees are orgless in NA.
True.
Which is pretty
NA
cool.
And EU, I believe, as well. EU has all Like every single team has a roster now for
Yeah, you're right.
RLCS.
That's pretty cool.
Least.
I mean, that's something I don't think we've ever really been able to say. And maybe there's an org announcement coming for the Birds and the Bees sometime soon. Of course,
Hopefully.
you and I don't know that, but maybe we will have an all-orged roster. But man, I really think that people don't give enough credit to how NA RLCS is shaping up, because there are some teams that could come out of nowhere, and I really think Rogue is going to be one of those teams.
Oh, yeah. Like Rogue, if they prove themselves in that first matchup and then show the consistency, which I feel like that's kind of been what they've lacked the most, especially last season. They had a lot of potential to make it even farther during the World Championship, but unfortunately they weren't able to get all the way to those finals. And even at a Rocket League Summit, I think they went out before day 2. I could be mistaken there, but Rogue, they had so much going for them, and I feel like the new roster that they formed just had to get used to each other. So maybe this is the season where they build more of that chemistry and prove themselves worthy of one of those top spots.
And just before we move on, I do want to acknowledge what Squid said in chat. Birds and Bees to Liquid. I would be instantly a Birds and Bees fan. There would be no other team in my eyes in NA, but yeah, I mean, maybe one day we'll see Liquid get into the scene, but I doubt it will happen anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more we can really talk about.
I think that's pretty much all we can talk about the NA scene for RLCS at least. So let's move on to Europe and see what the matches are that'll be happening this weekend. For that, we have Veloce versus Complexity, Barcelona versus Reciprocity, Dignitas versus Veloce, Complexity versus Vitality. That sounds like a fun one. And TSM versus MOUZ. So a lot of these teams have had roster changes in EU. So that's really going to be the big determining factor. I feel like this first week kind of establishing the pecking order for a lot of these teams, which has been happening almost every single season for EU because it always changes.
I mean, it's Rocket League. That just seems to be the MO of people. I mean, how many teams did we see disband after not making the play or not making our rival series? All over Twitter, people are saying they're looking for teams or finding new players and stuff like that. So that's kind of that's ingrained in the community, and EU's just going to have to go through the cycle again. But I think there are some standout teams, and I know that you and I disagree on a couple of them.
Yeah, I think it was really only one during the predictions that we went. So let's take a look at those real quick, and as well as what Twitter thought. And it's always interesting seeing the comparisons there. But the only one that we really disagreed on was the MOUZ and TSM. And I'll go first on explaining my thoughts on this one. TSM as a whole, even before iGNITE left or kicked or whatever happened there, they've just struggled in results recently and even keeping consistent with their own level of play. So hopefully with Alpha 54 it'll be better, but I think they went out like day 1 at DreamHack Montreal as well. So they just haven't had good results at all.
Yeah, TSM is one of those teams, in my opinion, that can be inconsistent. They look really good when they're on, but when they're off, it's quite often. To be honest, I think MOUZ suffers a little bit from that as well, which is why this one was probably the matchup across all of RLCS, both sides, that gave me the most struggle when I was picking the team here.
I mean, same for the Twitter votes too, because TSM 48, MOUZ 52, so it's pretty close, and that's out of like 21 votes. But we'll have more next week, hopefully. But MOUZ, I feel like now that they have an org backing them, they might have a little bit more consistency there, just because they don't have to rely on themselves to just motivate them to actually do the best they can. Now they have a salary, they have everything backing them that they need to go forward, whereas before they were just playing on pure spirit, it feels like.
Right. Yeah, and potentially that's a mindset thing, that it just gives them more confidence, or they just feel more at ease while playing, not having to worry as much about that kind of stuff. And that is a completely valid argument. I could totally see MOUZ doing good things this season. But you have to convince me that the combo of Cuxier, speed, and a lot can win against the best teams. And we've seen TSM take down teams.
True.
Like, with the talent that like Barcelona has and complexity and things like that. And I think that TSM gets off to a quick start this season. I think that they come out with, more vigor than last season, purely because Alpha 54 is such a quality player. I mean, he won MVP last season in EU. So how do you count out the EU MVP of last year? It's tough, but we're just gonna have to see again. Can TSM come together as a team? Can Mouse come together as a team? Whichever one does that first takes the victory, I think, in week 1.
That's really what it comes down to with a lot of these league play matches, is how consistent a team can be. And I really need TSM to prove themselves worthy of my predictions, and like everyone else, like worthy of the support they've been giving them, because TSM as a roster, as an organization in Rocket League, they've had so much potential. They've just kind of squandered it. And you mentioned it yourself, bringing Alpha 54, that's going to help a lot to bring the legitimacy that they were kind of lacking before with their roster. They have the MVP from last season. We need to see more out of Remco and Metza, and hopefully they'll be able to, after DreamHack Montreal, put the practice in and the work in, and show everyone that they deserve to be where they're at, and not going to end up at the bottom of the league and not even have a chance to go to RLCS.
Yeah, I think just outside of those two teams is really all we've talked about so far. This season for EU RLCS, I think, is going to take people by surprise. I think most people have Vitality as that top team. They were certainly great last season. I think they get challenged. I think Dignitas does well again this season. Violent Panda, Yukio, Astral is so unbelievably good. The kid has so much potential that I really think, again, it's that kind of reinvigoration of the team that Astral brings to Dignitas that they didn't have before, and that Alpha brings to TSM. But there's going to be so much at the top that these teams are going to be fighting out week after week. I don't think anybody goes perfect this season.
No,
but that's the cool thing,
so
is that
surprising.
If Barcelona and Dignitas and Vitality all kind of trade wins with each other and they start struggling and they can't pull away from the group, that gives somebody like a Mouse or like a Complexity or even a TSM a chance to sneak in there and find a 3rd or 4th place spot, which is awesome.
Hopefully they'll be able to really show up this season. That's what we haven't seen from a lot of these teams recently. Dignitas kind of squandered a lot of opportunities last season, same as TSM. Really looking out for them to step up to the plate. But when these teams do step up to the plate, there's going to be a lot of teams that did well last season that aren't going to be looking so hot. And it might just be because they're being left in the dust because of the experience that a lot of these players will have, and just the work ethic that we're going to be seeing from a lot of the teams that have been put in over the offseason and will hopefully continue for them during league play as well.
Yeah, I think a team that exemplifies that has to be Veloce. I mean, they they get in on a bit of a fluke. I mean, they were kind of grandfathered into it. It's not their fault, of course. They'll take it, but I didn't see anything that screams a great RLCS team to me last season from them. I don't think we'll see it again. I would love to be proven wrong, because that would only mean that EU gets even more crazy with a good Veloce. But, the level of talent is so even across the board. It just feels like Veloce is a step down from that. And, I would not be surprised to see them have a 1-win-ish season again.
Well, they brought in Casio from Triple Trouble and all the issues that they had there, unfortunately. And that roster were able to make it all the way to World Championship, but they broke apart. Ronicky joining Barcelona. Barcelona have kind of struggled in international events from what we've seen. Like, there's been high expectations for that team, especially when they had Alpha 54. And now that Ronicky has joined, I don't think he's going to give them that consistency they're looking for. And I don't think he's going to be a good like replacement for Alpha 54 either. So I feel like that team's might not even do as well as they did last season,
Sure.
which is going to be a struggle for them. And I feel like Veloce, they're kind of in a similar boat. They did promote up, but who knows how well that team is going to do, because they didn't promote up from winning the promo tournament. Triple Trouble just disbanded, and then they got the auto promotion.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was saying. It was a bit of a fluke for Veloce. But just to talk about Barca very quickly, I think the consistency factor comes down to Bluey and Devo. They have to be consistent. I mean, their play style is such that when they're on, they're amazing. When they're off, it is unbelievably difficult for them to win a game.
So hard.
They can be a very good team, but Bluey and Devo have to play together, and they have to play well the entire season, or it's not going to happen.
And that's how it's going to come down to for all of Europe specifically, is like how well these teams play. I think the biggest question mark we have in North America is like Ghost, just because they have Atomic and drop Lethamyr, and then the way that the Pittsburgh Knights and Birds and the Bees kind of mesh into that entire system there. The rest of the teams, they've been kind of consistent with their performances. Ghost, they've been more bottom of the barrel. And Rogue, they really stepped up last season. But now with Birds and the Bees and with the Pittsburgh Knights, those teams are very hungry compared to how I feel Rogue is. Rogue has a lot of new talent in there. As far as the RLCS is concerned, with AJ and Wonder. And if that team is able to gel well enough, they can prove themselves consistent. But I feel like that's enough talk about RLCS for now, though. Well, for at least North America and Europe. We could go on for hours and hours about this. Let's move on to a region we aren't as familiar with this season specifically, South America, and talk about some of those teams that are going to be playing this first week and some of the rosters, I guess, for that. There's been a lot of changes in the offseason, but the teams that are facing off, we got Oxy team, which have a pretty dope logo, versus Goats. We have Low-Key Esports versus Orchid, INTZ versus Goat, Oxy versus Lotus, and INTZ versus Hawks. And a lot of these teams we haven't really seen before. We haven't seen Goat Gaming. We haven't seen Hawks. We haven't seen Oxy Team either. The Three Sins, we've seen those folks, and they aren't actually playing this first week, so they kind of have a bye, which is good for them. But the top four, I feel, has just kind of stayed the same, and the bottom four is just going to be a big question mark for me personally.
Yeah, the thing that we saw with the Grand Series last year was the giant separation in talent.
Yeah.
There were, like you said, top four. Top four. I mean, it was debatable, 3 or 4, but I will go out on a limb and say there are a top 4 in South America. And if things haven't changed over the offseason, it's going to stay that way again.
Yeah.
A different team in the Three Sins, at least under a different name coming into it. But you have Vault and Math, and both of those players did so well last year
as well. Like that's an insane roster. And like all these teams have kind of formed their own super rosters that are of those top 4. That's Lotus, the Three Sins, INTZ, and Low-Key. And really, I feel like it's just going to be a fight amongst those 4. Orchid might have a chance because they have Noisy, and he was on a different roster last go around, if I'm not mistaken there. But I think he was on a Rhodium, actually. But he's going to be looking forward to what he can do this season with his team. And it's going to be difficult after the changes that have been made for a lot of these rosters. But we'll have to see a little bit more of them. I need to pay attention to the play-ins for those, because that was pretty insane to see the different rosters there. But if you look at the different teams that qualified during the play-ins, Lotus, the Three Sins, they kind of like dominated their groups. Lotus 9-2, Three Sins 9-0. Oxy team, they actually did really well against the rest of South America, which they went 9-0, and the Hawks went 9-0 as well. So they have potential. Orchid, they went 6-3, only lost one of their matches. And let's see who that was against. That was against Oxy team, and that was a 3-0. So Orchid, a lot of people thought were kind of that like 5th spot, but maybe not this season.
Yeah, Bruno. If I remember correctly, last season Bruno had an okay season. I think
Mhm.
had nothing.
And Bruno Visky.
Yeah, exactly. That nothing that really stood out to me too much. He was a consistent player. I mean, he did the things that he needed to do to try to help his team win, but there were no special moments, I think, that we saw. And I mean, he's just going to have to step it up this season. I think he's got to be a leader on that team if he wants to carry Orchid into some kind of top 5, top 4 situation. But again, the separation of power in South America, I think, really puts a lot of pressure on the lower teams to try to perform, because as soon as you start dropping games to INTZ, to Lotus and Low Key, it's really going to be difficult to claw your way back up.
Oh yeah, and INTZ and Loki were the ones who actually made it all the way to the World Championship last season, and they looked pretty good. Lotus were the ones who made it to DreamHack Montreal, and as mentioned before, they took down Rogue 3-1. So that was pretty insane to see from them specifically. So these teams just keep getting better.
Win.
Yeah, first ever international win. They're just going to continue to get better as they get more experience and as the seasons go on. And now that these roster changes have happened, I feel like in the top 4, it's really a toss-up on who's going to come out on top. Yeah. Lotus, they did for DreamHack Montreal to qualify, but we could see more out of the 3 Sins just because they have a really stellar roster. INTZ and Loki, I feel like they're a little bit weaker than they were before, so they're going to kind of struggle to stay up on the top.
Well, I just want that rematch between Math and Card for who qualifies into the rival series, because I had the pleasure of calling that game on the English broadcast last season, that qualifying game, and it was just lights out from both teams the entire way. Went to all 5 games into overtime and everything.
Yeah.
And, that is just kind of the level that those players play at. And what's really cool, to me at least, for South America is that they're no longer the region that gets overlooked or perhaps underestimated anymore, because, I mean, again, personal opinion, they showed up OCE in all of the most recent events. I mean, Montreal and Worlds. And to me, South America is a little bit ahead of OCE, and I think people are starting to take note, because these teams are dangerous. They're going to continue to be dangerous, and they could certainly upset some teams that people don't think can lose at Worlds.
That's going to be great to see, too. I'm so excited for the next Worlds that'll be actually happening. That's in Madrid, correct?
Madrid, yes.
That's going to be interesting to see them on that kind of an international stage, but it's going to be very great to see if any of the OCE teams have performed. Speaking of OCE, we can move on to that section of the show and talk about them. We do have the results for the first match of League Play, and this is kind of some of the matches. Most of the team names you recognize there, getting the 3-0 sweeps: Renegades, Ground Zero, and the Chiefs. And Mind Freak, which had Ghost, Canny Salmon, Lim, and Cabo as the sub. Lost to Overt, which the main name a lot of people would recognize there is Kia, who used to be on one of the major rosters in OCE. They actually were able to win that matchup, so kudos to them. But a 5-game series, I feel like the top 3 is definitely going to be like Chiefs, Renegades, and Ground Zero, as we've kind of seen. And I think last season there was really a top 3 as well, especially because Drippe had left to the North American scene. So it wasn't just the Chiefs at the top. And what's interesting is, like, in the offseason, I think Chiefs roster got bought, or not offseason, during some point of time, Chiefs got bought by Renegades, like that roster, and then Chiefs had their own rosters.
Yeah, it was kind of weird there.
Kind of weird going on there.
I mean, yeah, I think any team that gets Drippe back in OCE is just going to be a better roster than what they were before. I think.
True.
Even with his struggles last year in Europe, I think Drippe is still. It's arguable, but I still think he is the number one player in OCE right now. I mean, you can certainly make a case for somebody like CJ or Torsauce or really anybody on those top three teams have looked very good.
True.
But what I want to see from OCE this season, and maybe it sounds a little dumb, I want to see a statement season from one team.
Oh yeah.
Just dominate everybody. No dropped games, no close games even. Just absolute domination, and show us that you deserve to go to Worlds and that you will be a force there, because right now people are saying, what does OC have? What can they give us? And it's a struggle with them. I mean, the recent change of orgs to run RLCS for them, they move over to it's Let's Play Live, right? Yeah, Let's Play Live now, running that. And, it's a struggle. There needs to be somebody that sets the bar in OCE. And I don't know who it is. I think it could be the Chiefs, but, they're going to have to play well.
Yeah, the Chiefs as an org has been able to do it, and then when Alpha Sydney was around, they were able to do it too. But that was I think that was Torsauce, Drippe, and Jake when they were all the super team of OCE.
Right.
But now they are in different rosters. Torsauce being in the Renegades with Kami and Siki, and then Chiefs having CJ, Express, and Drippe. That's going to be a great roster. Ground Zero, I think they're going to struggle the most out of those three. They have Requiem, and he's a great guy that's been in the RL esports chat on the Discord a lot of the times, but I haven't seen too much personally from him, so really looking forward to the performance they're able to put on. But all three of those teams currently sitting 3-0, as kind of expected. But next week, looking at those matches, week 2, Ground Zero versus Chiefs, that is going to be a great matchup.
Yeah, that's the matchup I think that everybody should be watching if you get the opportunity to tune into that. Because, again, I think the Chiefs come out on top in OCE, but it's got to be domination throughout, and you start in week 2 against Ground Zero. You say, we are the number one team. Nobody is going to challenge us. We are walking our way to Worlds. We'll see if they can do it. But, we talk about how Sam has a top 4. OC's got that top 3, and you never know. There's always that chance of a dark horse team because, if you're not in the OCE scene, you probably don't know the players. I mean, it's what people fall victim to all the time on these kind of regions, that maybe a team like, Mind Freak or even, a brand new team coming into this season like Mprox, you never know who could do something. But, it seems cut and dry, but I need to see a team step up to the plate.
Yeah, and the great thing about the Chiefs and their first few weeks of league play is they play Ground Zero second week, third week they play Renegades. So if they win those 2 matches, and in a pretty stealth fashion, even if it's 3-2, they're going to be on the road to making sure that they are in the best spot they can be to qualify, and just have to worry about not letting up against any of these other rosters. And I feel like from what we've seen from Drippe in the past and CJ and Express, they've been able to constantly get to the world stage. They're going to look pretty consistent as far as that goes and trying to get back to the world championship. But it'll be great to see what happens there. And that wraps up our RLCS section. So let's move on to the Rivals Series portion of this show. And this is where there's going to be an interesting things to talk about a lot of these teams, because there's 10 teams in the Rivals Series. We don't have any results yet because this will be the first weekend, not the first week. First week is technically next week when the main broadcast starts. But we have the B-Stream matches. And let's go over those real quick. Afterthought versus Plot Twist. Bolsen versus Upper 90. Compadres versus Upper 90. And Compadres versus Nefarious. I mean, I feel like most of these are pretty cut and dry. And we can just hop on over to our actual predictions here, too. And most of them, we pretty much thought the same thing. I guess the biggest thing for the Twitter poll was that Upper 90 were the ones that retweeted that tweet. So maybe that kind of influenced a little bit for them to win that one. But the biggest, I think, one that we're questioning mainly me, I feel, is the Nefarious Compadres matchup, which I feel will be pretty contested.
I have to say I feel pretty good that Twitter is on my side with that matchup, because it did give me a bit of pause when I was trying to decide on that. Really, I think the best matchup of the day is going to be Afterthought and Plot Twist, because we get to see
100%.
powerhouse teams. We get to see Satthews return to the rival series. And Dapper as well. I mean, Shock, of course, you can't talk about Afterthought without talking about Shock, who's kind of the leader of that team right now. But, you go up against a team like Plot Twist, it's Corrupted G. I mean, how much have we watched Corrupted G play?
So
and then
much.
you've got Taroko and Mektos in support of him as well. They've got Sad Jr. working with their team, on the back end, things like that. There's a lot going for Plot Twist that even though I've picked Afterthought, I don't think it's as clear as people are making it out to be.
It's not going to be.
So
I feel like this will be the first match for Plot Twist to kind of prove themselves. And we haven't seen them much at all other than during those qualifiers for WGN. And they didn't even win the event. Bolsen were the ones who came out on top there. So that'll be interesting to see if the training they've been doing, the practicing, and the scrims have been enough to kind of keep informed. Because the great thing about all these other teams who didn't have to wait in the actual rival series already is they've been able to play in all these other tournaments and go to these other events and really kind of get that experience. And even in the play-ins, you play a lot of the teams that you'll potentially be facing. And that's what's going to be happening in that Compadres and Nefarious matchup. We saw Nefarious reverse sweep the Compadres after the plans, but this will be a Compadres who didn't have to go through multiple hours of Rocket League. They're actually going to have just one match before against Upper 90. And to your point and to Twitter's point, if they win that one against Upper 90, they're going to look very solid. But this Upper 90 team is a big wild card, especially since they switched the roster a little bit. And Melodic is actually going to be their starting player instead of a sub this time.
Yeah, well, Melodic joining the lineup, of course, Ghost having to back out a couple weeks before, still on the roster as the sub, so we might get to see him play this season. But yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to the Compadres. They go up against Upper 90 first. And the reason why I picked the Compadres over Upper 90 is because
I did too, yeah.
Just because Upper 90, they haven't shown the consistency to play well, and I think they're going to struggle early on, especially against a team like Compadres, who have been grinding, and they've really wanted this opportunity, and they're here now. They have a chance to prove it, and coming off of that win, then to play Nefarious, I think that confidence after the first win against Upper 90 puts them over the top. But it's going to be tough because, Thunda, Buddy, Turinturo, there are three fantastic players, but the Compadres are also ZPS, Astro, and Skills. It just sounds like you're putting the same team against each other.
It really does.
but with the Compadres, I assume they will get the victory over Upper 90. I think that gives them confidence to start 2-0.
Yeah, Compadres have more experience as far as the rival series is concerned compared to Nefarious specifically, so that'll definitely help. As well, Upper 90, if they lose to Bullsend, I feel like that's a team that'll kind of get tilted a little bit. And that's what happens with a lot of these, previously bubble teams, now actually in the rival series.
Yeah, no longer bubble teams. Yeah.
Upper 90, they still have a long way to go, especially in that consistency, as you mentioned. Bullsend, they struggled a little bit during the play-ins, but they did win that WGN event against all these other teams that we are seeing that either qualified for the rival series or were in it already, like Plot Twist. So that'll be a big one to really determine. And I feel like if Compadres come off a loss, it'll be in the favor of Nefarious, especially because Compadres almost got reverse swept again when they were qualifying for the rival series. So It's going to be a tough one,
Yeah.
but I'm excited. It's going to be another close one. I feel like that and the afterthought and plot twist match are going to be the best ones of the weekend specifically.
Yeah, and I just a point about Bull Send, and potentially I could anger the team when I say this, but honestly, I think them winning WGN, especially beating our RBG to win, I think that kind of hurt them in a way. Yes, it's great. You won the event, and nobody's going to take anything away from you for doing that, but it put the expectations on that team up to an entirely new level, because they go into that, nobody's talking about them as much as they are now, and they come out, it's like, wow, Bull Send, look at this team, they have a real opportunity, and they took them quite a bit of playing to get into the rival series this season. And I think that is kind of weighing them down a little, that they have these expectations to be a quality team. And, we'll see if they can shake that off and get a victory in week one. That'll do a lot for their confidence if they can pull out their first win early. But, I'm not sure. We'll just have to see how they handle the pressure.
Yeah, it's going to be great to see these teams, especially this will be the first time that they're on stream. It's going to be on the V stream on Rival Esports. Going to be a great time. And also another note to bring up about the Compadres and Nefarious matchup. Both of them were like the 4th and 5th seed going into the play-ins. That just really shows, like you mentioned it, they're basically mirrors of themselves. So it's going to be a great time. And you could toss a coin and still not get the prediction correctly, because you could toss it like 1,000 times and it'd still be like up in the air, because you would never know who's really going to win that one until it actually comes down to the match. So that'll be great to see what happens there. Let's move on to the European side. And what's great about this season is that the B streams for these, so Europe will actually be on Saturday and North America will be on Sunday. So we'll see Europe before we will see North America, kind of like how we do on the broadcast itself for the Rival Series. So that's going to be an interesting one. We have the matches. We have Team Echo Zulu versus Baguette Squad. Baguette Squad versus, I think that's Vertex. I need to make sure I pronounce that one correctly. And then we have Discombobulators, which is a great team. They have an amazing logo, versus ARG, which has been around a bit. Any of those teams you want to specifically talk about before we go into the comparisons there?
Yeah, this is probably the area that I'm going to struggle with the most. I think on my predictions is EU Rival Series. I liked what I saw last season from ARG. They weren't able to get over the hump into the top 2 positions, but they did secure that 3rd place spot last season. So I expect them to continue with that kind of momentum. But there's a lot of really good teams that made it in, and the Baguette Squad, one of the best French teams in that bubble scene prior to the play-ins, and I think there are people that challenge both Method and ARG, but for me to pick these individual matches, it's so difficult. Because I don't know. I mean, you just take like Echo Zulu. Remember that whole Echo Zulu era for a little while when they did super well?
They just beat some of the RLCS teams and no one expected it. Yeah.
Right, and you're like, okay, Echo Zulu, they're going to make Rival Series for sure, and then they don't. And now they're here. They finally made it, but are they going to be the same Echo Zulu we were expecting? I don't know, because how can you even know? And especially with EU, it's so complicated that, it also hurts that I've spent about 99% of my time focusing on North American bubble players.
Yeah.
So, you couple that with how close it is in Europe, that I have a feeling that my prediction rate is going to go way down at the start of EU Rival Series.
Yeah, so let's quickly go through this one then for the predictions. I think the only thing there, and you kind of mentioned it yourself, and also Twitter had some interesting thoughts about this too, is that the Team Echo Zulu, I need to actually look at the comparisons of the percentages there. So most people on Twitter, 77% voted for Team Echo Zulu. Baguette Squad, my reasoning behind that, and I talked to some other teams that or some other people that know Europe a bit more, so I might have been cheating.
So you cheated?
Maybe a bit. But I needed advice on it. But this is actually after I just randomly guessed because I wasn't 100% sure on that one. With Team Echo Zulu, they did have those results. Baguette Squad, just French Rocket League players in general, they just have this aura around them where they're just able to put in 110% and upset so many other teams in Rocket League in general. So that's why I'm like, you know what? I'm going for Baguette Squad. That's what my heart's saying. Maybe it's going to be wrong. We'll have to see what happens there. Match 2, we both thought Baguette Squad, but I guess Twitter, I think the org actually retweeted that. So we'll see what happens there with that roster specifically. Yeah, the team retweeted. So that might have skewed the votes a little bit because they had 76%, but before they were lower than Baguette Squad. And then the last one, ARG versus Discombobulators. ARG are 77% to 23% for the Twitter polls. But I've talked to people after we submitted our predictions is that ARG haven't looked as good with Monkey Moon in scrims specifically. So obviously scrims aren't the end all be all, but man, who knows?
Yeah. I've learned over my time being and watching and talking to players that when somebody says that a team, they're doing great in scrims or we're doing amazing in scrims, I almost immediately throw it out the window. Just because scrims are different. I mean, it's not the same environment. I haven't played Rocket League at the top level, but I've been in esports for a very long time. I've played games at the highest level, and you can do great in scrims. That does not translate to victories in league play, especially when there's the pressure of playing on stream and this is your first season or what have you. And even, it can go the other way as well. ARG is struggling in scrims. Maybe they're just trying something different. Maybe they're saying, Monkey Moon, we want to see how you play. We're going to change up a little bit. Let's watch how you do it, and we'll adapt to you. And then eventually they'll start to click a bit on into the season.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We'll have to really see. It's going to be tough.
I am looking forward to Team Vertex. The only full German team, I believe, that's made it into the rival series. We'll see how that their play style kind of develops throughout the season. Granted, I did pick the French team over the Germans, but I am interested to see what Vertex can bring, and I think they could be a surprise.
That's how I feel like all of that rival series is going to go for Europe specifically. Like NA, it's a little more cut and dry with some of the teams. I feel like there's definitely like a top 4 there, but with EU, it's just like, who knows?
Well, so we'll see if it's one of us.
Yeah, we'll see if we know, and that'll be great to compare next week to see how close we were. And we're also going to be polling how well Twitter's been doing. So at the end of the season for all of these league plays, we'll see like who came out on top, region by region, and then like I guess a whole like at the end sort of tally. It'll be great to see that. So it's so fun about this and why we changed the format a bit. But let's move on to CRL now. We're going to go through this, and this will kind of be where we wrap up the show afterwards. But we're separating by Eastern and Western conferences, not really the day specifically. But there's a lot of matches that have gone on already, and it'd take way too long to go over every single one of them. So we're just going to focus on kind of the ones that are coming up this week for the B stream. And that is UCF versus Michigan. We have Nova, which is Northern Virginia, versus RIT. And then UCF versus Waterloo, University of Michigan versus Nova. And that's for the B stream matches, which is Thursday and Friday. And I feel like we might as well just go on to our predictions here too, because it's interesting that we basically agreed across the board on this one. It's the first time out of any of them. There wasn't anything. And looking at the Twitter poll, it was actually a 50-50 tie for UCF and University of Waterloo, which is interesting.
Well, the fact that there's a 50-50 tie for UCF and Waterloo kind of blows my mind.
There really shouldn't be.
And I don't know, maybe it's some kind of recency bias for Twitter or something, but for them picking UCF over Michigan, it hurts a little bit because UCF has been a great team in the past.
Yeah.
But they're weaker this season, and I mean, they lost to Miami, Ohio, which Miami, Ohio is a great team, but they have not looked good. Have UCF previous, like in CRL, or I mean in CCA, now coming into the first week of CRL? I'm really doubting UCF, and I feel terrible for saying that because I like all of the players. But, to put them over Michigan, and Michigan, let me just confirm, Michigan's 2-0. 2-0, they went 6-1. And their goal differential is quite good as well. Yeah. It's interesting. Like I said, maybe it's some kind of recency bias with UCF that people are picking them because they hey, I know Central Florida, they're good. But Michigan, Miami, Ohio, GVSU and Akron, all of those teams are looking very good. And the fact that, that they have momentum coming in against UCF, I cannot pick the side of Central Florida.
No, me neither there, man. And another thing to note is that University of Waterloo, the team members that are on that roster specifically, if you look at UCF, probably don't know many of these names, Snipes, Dirty Eagle, or Bits. But with Waterloo, there's MD22 and Go Rocks Go. And even Gibb, people I've heard of before. Those are some pretty good players that have been around the scene for quite some time. Looking at Michigan, Buddha, Shawnee Boy, Clavin, I don't know. I don't know what Twitter's thinking.
It's collegiate Rocket League, man. Not only is there inconsistencies week to week from the teams, but there's always going to be those kind of misnomers and assumptions that people make just because. And another team that should be scary this season is Stockton with Gino Kopp joining the mix. I mean, Dark Large and Gino, now we get to finally see them play together, and I'm really scared for UCF. They were very good in previous seasons. They've lost 2 out of their 3 starters, I believe. Snipes, for instance, was a sub last season, and Bits is the only remaining member for season 4. That you talk about UCF and that Central Florida, South Florida kind of rivalry. I think that still exists, but that's not going to be the main focus. I think your main focus this season has to be Akron, has to be Michigan, has to be GVSU, especially after their win over Miami last night, and of course the Ohio State teams as well. I love the East. I think it's so much fun.
Oh, it's going to be great. I mean, even Akron, they were kind of struggling a little bit in other events from what we saw, but now they're just kind of proving themselves. We'll see what happens with a lot of these rosters. Ohio specifically, as a state, they have so many teams in the Eastern Conference. It's insane. I think they have the most out of any different state, which is just crazy to see, and they're great teams too. So,
well, there's nothing to do in Ohio other than play Rocket League.
Yeah, I guess other than play Rocket League.
But yeah, I'm really excited for the East. I think there are a lot of teams, Stockton and Waterloo, and even Rutgers as well. Penn State. I mean, my goodness, all of those teams could make runs, and it's just going to come down to who plays the best over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, looking at those matches, I think Nova's going to go 0-3 this week because they have 2 matches during the B streams. One that we'll actually be casting tonight against RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. And that's going to be an interesting matchup there because it's kind of one of them will get a win. But I think RIT looked a little bit better coming into the actual plans themselves. They've just faced some very tough teams, and their matches were a lot closer. They've had a lot of overtimes, whereas Nova's kind of just been, they've struggled a lot, but they also have faced some really, the only team they faced so far actually was Akron,
Yeah, but
And
they have Titanium though, and Jake, and both of those players are legitimate bubble scene players. They didn't play in the play-ins this season, but any
I
other
feel they're a
season,
bit too
they're
rusty, though.
contenders.
They're a bit too rusty. And Titanium, he's
Fair
new
enough.
to the roster too. He just graduated high school this last year,
Sure.
so that'll be an interesting thing to see. Maybe they'll get better as the season goes on, but it's just not looking good, especially because they're facing University of Michigan. I don't think they're going to win that one at all. They might win the one against RIT. That'll be their best shot to really go, at least get one win under their belts.
Sure.
But I think let's move on to our final portion, which will be Western, and kind of talk about the matches that are happening there. The graphic on here, just because Liquipedia is a little bit behind, UM is actually Mizzou Esports, University of Missouri. I guess they just have it outdated on there, but their current results are 0-3.
Yeah,
so
I'm not sure.
They have not looked good at all. Let's go into our predictions just because we're running a little bit out of time here and see the differences there. Yeah, all across the board, pretty much. The only difference is that UTA, which is University of Texas Arlington versus University of Nebraska matchup. But other than that, like most people kind of agreed on the matchups here. Like, I don't know. UCSB, we haven't seen them yet. And the roster specifically, like Viking King, pretty solid. But this is really the first spot that I think Mizzou Esports will kind of take the victory there. They've been very close in a lot of their matches, but 1-goal games, even the ones that they have won and lost. But whenever they kind of get down on their luck, they get blown out, like we saw happen with the first one with LSU. But UCSB, kind of a big question mark right now for me personally.
Yeah, I think they could certainly be a dark horse. I'm not sure. We'd have to watch them play. I don't have a ton.
We will see them tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know how they're gonna come out and play, but the top four in the West, teams we expected: Arizona, LSU, North Texas, and Nebraska. And I don't see UTA really challenging Nebraska too much. That's why I picked Nebraska over top of UTA. And just to mention Mizzou, they're 0-3 to start the season, but I just mentioned the top four teams. They played 3 of them.
Yeah.
They played Arizona, they played LSU, and they played Nebraska. The only team left now for them to try to – I'm sorry, they didn't play they did not play –
They haven't played Arizona yet, but –
No, they played LSU, Nebraska, and UNT. So the final team they have to play in that top 4 is Arizona, which is probably the hardest matchup they're going to have.
Oh, yeah.
But against every other team, they're the bottom of the leaderboard right now because they're 0-3. But against every other team, including the Cal Poly teams, I give the edge to Mizzou because they're a quality team. So
they're a really good team. I think they were the first seed in their pool to try and qualify as well, if I'm not mistaken about that one.
Yeah, it was something like that, something close to that. And maybe it's a strategy from Mizzou. They just said, "All right, we'll schedule all of our hard games week 1, and then just try to coast through the rest of it." Maybe it'll work out, maybe not. But again, to your point, Mizzou played close against those top 4 teams at times, and
True.
If they build upon that and maybe force Arizona to a game 5, maybe take the victory over Arizona, it could turn their season around quickly.
I mean, they also brought UNT, a team that made it to the actual LAN finals last season in spring. They brought them all the way to game 5. So the biggest thing for them is that they just made some errors whenever we have seen UNT win, in the overtime that happened last night. And this was after I already submitted my thoughts about
me too.
Mizzou, is that they only lost because of a mistake on defense. And if they are able to clean those up, and these are against the best teams that we think are out there for the Western Conference, they're going to look really good going into these later stages. University of Texas Arlington, the reason I voted for them, and this might just be some bias, is that I know a little bit more of the players there, and I feel like there is some upset potential for UTA. But with the way that Nebraska has been against some of these other teams and in the past, I feel like they're also going to do pretty well. So I feel like that is highly in the favor of Nebraska, but I would love to see the dark horse team, who literally have a horse as their logo, come back and hopefully put some pressure on Nebraska there and make it at least a good series.
Yeah, I think Adverse Meteor is the player to watch in that series. Does he come up and play? But, I mean, you look across and you've got Parker Penguin and Roseladon, two very, very good players. I mean, Roseladon was on a team that nearly qualified for the rival series, for instance.
True.
And you know, Nebraska looks good again. And, yeah, UTA has a chance. I think it comes down to Meteor and what he does.
That's what it is at the end of the day. For a lot of these matches, we have to just wait and see what happens. But we thank you all for joining us for the first episode of this new format, episode 7 of the entire show, though. New co-host, Hunted. Thanks so much for joining me for this week. I'm so excited to see what happens. You can catch us on the college, I think it's College Carball. Is that what their Twitch handle is?
Yes, College Carball.
College Carball. Mm-hmm. For the CRL-B stream in basically less than an hour at this point as it'll start. So hope you have all enjoyed the show so far. Definitely catch it on Spotify and YouTube once it gets uploaded to there. We're going to even ramp up the show a little bit more. If you have any feedback about the show, tweet me at Vaudable or tweet Hunted as well at iHunted, and we'll be able to give you some good interaction there. But thank you so much for tuning in to episode 7 of Boost Pickup. And we'll talk to you next week and hope you have some good suggestions and good predictions. And we'll see who comes out on top for the first week of those predictions next time. Thanks for tuning in.